Well, here we are again with another session of lockdown learning. I'm Paul Holland, and this particular video is going to concentrate on result clauses in Latin. There are two reasons for you to know these really well. First of all, there will definitely be in your GCSE language paper at least one or two result clauses which you need to translate accurately, effectively, to make sure that you get the meaning across. Another reason is that they are slightly problematic in that they look very similar to purpose clauses. And in fact, we're going to start the video by looking at a purpose clause just to remind ourselves why they are so similar and how easy it is actually to fall into the trap of translating them wrongly. Not only do they look very similar to purpose clauses, but you often in school learn them at about the same time as purpose clauses because they involve the subjunctive and they involve a similar kind of construction, and so it's possible that you might get them confused in your minds because you probably learnt purpose clauses one week and within a week or two you'd actually been introduced to result clauses. So if you haven't yet looked at purpose clauses, I would certainly recommend you check out my video on ut plus subjunctive. It's a really useful introduction to explain exactly how this works and how the subjunctive works with it. And the kind of construction that you'll see is on the screen now. Here we are. It's a very typical purpose clause. And as you'll see, it's in two halves. The first half is always the main clause, and that tells us what somebody did to begin with. The god sent a monster down to earth. But the second half is always an explanation of why that thing or person did what they did in the first half of the sentence. In other words, it explains the purpose. Why did the god send the monster? It was in order to destroy all the cities. And this second part, the purpose clause itself, if you like, is always introduced by ut, the word ut, plus at the end of the sentence, deleret is a subjunctive, and we'll come on to that later very briefly, but it's a subjunctive. So if you see ut plus a subjunctive, then you generally think, it must be a purpose clause. So now here is a result clause, and this one I've adapted it slightly, but I've taken it from a past paper, a higher GCSE past paper. It's based on the story of Atalanta, who participated against lots of young men in a race, each of them wanting to marry her. And here is the sentence in full, and as you can see, it looks very similar to the purpose clause that we saw before. It's in two halves, separated possibly by a comma, but not always. The second half looks as if it's beginning with the word ut, there it is, and at the end it has a subjunctive. But in result clauses, there is a third element to spot, and that's the key to spotting if you've got a result clause in front of you or not. And that's in the first half of the sentence. And it's this little word here, tam. And tam is what we call a signpost word. And the reason it's called a signpost word is because it points forward. It warns you that the second half of the sentence is not going to be a purpose clause, it's going to be a result clause. And so this sentence will be translated as follows. Atalanta ran so well that she always arrived first at the finishing post. So what you've got in a result clause is something rather different from a purpose clause. A purpose clause explained why somebody did something. That was the purpose of why they did it. I went to the shops to buy some bread. She opened the window in order to get some fresh air. But a result clause is, as it says, it's the result of the first action. It's not an intention or a purpose, it's a result. And so the first half will always have something like so much or such a big or in such a way that the second half is the result of that. I ate so much food that I was then full. And that second half is the result of the first half. The first half, I ate so much food. I ran so fast that I was really tired. And that was the result. So, as you can see, they are quite different from purpose clauses in their meaning. They mean something quite the opposite in lots of ways. Let's have another look at how this sentence actually functions, and so that we can identify what we're looking for. So there are three things to spot. The signpost word, tam, we'll come back to that in a moment. The ut in the middle, beginning the second half. And then at the very end, hopefully at the end of the sentence or the end of the clause, a verb in the subjunctive. So let's begin with the ut. You might remember that in purpose clauses, we translated ut as in order to. Whereas here, you'd probably translate it more like so that, or even just that, because the word so is probably hidden within the signpost word in the first half of the sentence. He ran so much that day, comma, that he slept really well that evening. Okay, so the result that he slept really well that evening was because he ran so much. So that ut is much more simply translated this time. And then at the end of the sentence, we've got this subjunctive. Now, I went into a lot of detail with my purpose clause videos as to why the subjunctive was used in those kinds of clauses. In purpose clauses, there was a bit of doubt about whether things were actually going to be done. Why on earth the Romans used a subjunctive here in result clauses, I have no idea. It seems very odd. There's no doubt here. There's nothing uncertain about the result, okay? The girl ran so fast that she definitely always arrived first. It's pretty obviously fact here rather than doubt or virtual possibilities. But unfortunately, the Romans did use it, and that's what we're stuck with. So I'm not going to go into the subjunctive in that much detail for this video, other than to say you need to recognize what a subjunctive verb looks like. And here we are. Here's a bunch of subjunctive verbs, and hopefully you can spot the fact that they look like the present infinitive, that basic ARE or ERE infinitive that you've probably been learning for ages. The present infinitive with one of these very basic endings on for the person. So if you have a verb that looks like this very soon after ut, then you'll know either it's a purpose clause, or if you go back a bit further and check out the signpost word and there is one there, then it's actually a result clause, and you've got to translate it as a result of what happened in the first half of the sentence. So let's have a look at that signpost word. There's only a handful of them to learn. Here they are. These are what you're going to need for GCSE. The most common one is tam, but you'll also find a few of the others sprinkled around. Ita comes up here and there, and so too does tantus. So great, so big. There was such a great noise that they could not sleep, for example. And that brings me on to a final point for result clauses, and that is that you can have a negative result clause, which you just heard there. And with a negative result clause, you simply add the word non as well as ut. So it's not as complicated as purpose clauses, where you had to learn that ut became ne in the negative. Actually, for result clauses, ut non is fine. That's what they use. So here's another example. Another awkward potential pitfall is this word, adeo. Adeo is used for verbs. So rather than say she was so tired, you might say she ran so much that, and you'd use it with a verb. The reason it can cause some problems when translating is it looks very, very similar, doesn't it, to another word which is actually completely unconnected, ad eo, which means to go towards something. Ad plus eo, one of your 7 irregular verbs. Good. So in summary, a result clause, dangerously similar to a purpose clause. It will also have two halves to it, and the second half will have ut and a subjunctive involved. It's the signpost word that's the key. If you can spot one of those signpost words in the first half of the sentence, then you translate it as so much or such. Right, there we are, that's that. I hope that's explained everything for you. That's result clauses in a nutshell. If it was useful, fantastic. I hope you got plenty out of it. Check out some of the other videos that I've made on Latin. Maybe also go and have a look at some of the other things in my playlists. They include history of art, classics, and some modern languages, some French and some German and some Italian. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Hope to see you again. Bye-bye.